Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nashtaprayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Ruttama Bhaktirbhavati Naishtiki Srinvata Swakatha Krishna Punyasravana Kirtanaha Hridantastoya Bhadrani Vidhunuti Surutsatam. Hare Krishna devotees, good morning. So today we are continuing the discussion from Canto 3, Chapter 23, Devothi's Lamentations, verse 4 and 5. Savai devarshivaryasta manavim samanvrutam daivad ghariyasha patyur asana mahashisha kalena bhuyasha kshamam karshitam vratacharyaya prema gadaya vacha piditaha kripaya bravit. Verse once again. Savai devarshivaryastam manavim samanvritam daivad gariyasha patyur asanam mahashishaha kalena bhuyasha kshamam karchitam vratacharyaya prema gadgadaya vacha piditaha kripaya bravit. Synonyms: Saha, he, Kardama. Why? Certainly. Deva Rishi, of the celestial sages. Varyaha, the foremost. Tam, her. Manavim, the daughter of Manu. Samanvritam, fully devoted. Daivat, than providence. Gari Yashaha, who was greater. Patyuhu, from her husband. Asanam, Asha Sanam, expecting. Maha Ashishaha, great blessings. Kalena Bhuyasha, for a long time. Kshamam, weak. Karshitam, emaciated. Vratacharyaya, by religious observances. Prema, with love. Gadgadaya, stammering. Vacha, with voice. Piditaha, overcome. Kripaya, with compassion. Abravit, he said. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhishek Narvinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. The daughter of Manu was fully devoted to her husband, looked upon him as greater even than providence. Thus, she expected great blessings from him. Having served him for a long time, she grew weak and emaciated due to her religious observances. Seeing her condition, Kardama, the foremost of celestial sages, was overcome with compassion and spoke to her in a voice choked with great love. Purport. The wife is expected to be of the same category as the husband. She must be prepared to follow the principles of the husband, and then there will be a happy life. If the husband is a devotee and wife is materialistic, there cannot be any peace in the home. The wife must see the tendencies of the husband and must be prepared to follow him. From Mahabharata, we learn that when Gandhari understood that her would-be husband Dhritarashtra was blind, she immediately began to practice blindness herself. Thus, she covered her eyes and played the part of a blind woman. She decided that since her husband was blind, she must also act like a blind woman. Otherwise, she would be proud of her eyes and her husband would be seen as inferior. The word samanuvrata indicates that it is the duty of a wife to adopt the special circumstances in which the husband is situated. Of course, if the husband is as great as Kardama Muni, then a very good result accrues from following him. But even if the husband is not a great devotee like Kardama Muni, it is the wife's duty to adapt herself according to his mentality. That makes married life very happy. It is also mentioned herein that by following the strict vows of chaste women, Princess Devahuti became very skinny and therefore her husband became compassionate. He knew that she was the daughter of a great king and yet was serving him just like an ordinary woman. She was reduced in health by such activities, and he became compassionate and addressed her as follows. We'll offer some prayers and continue with the discussion. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Once again, good morning. So we are in the sequence where Kardama Muni and Mother Devhuti got married and they're kind of living their household life. And this verse talks about, in a way, the relationship between Kardama Muni and Mother Devhuti and what was happening, and kind of a prelude to the further discussion that's going to happen between Kardama Muni and Devhuti. We'll read the translation once again. The daughter of Manu was fully devoted to her husband, looked upon him as a greater even than Providence. Thus, she expected great blessings from him. Having served him for a long time, she grew weak and emaciated due to her religious observances. Seeing her condition, Kardama, the foremost of celestial sages, was overcome with compassion and spoke to her in a voice choked with great love. Yesterday, Anantaru Prabhu gave a wonderful class on the importance of family life and what are the responsibilities of husband and wife. And I felt with his experience, just within the Krishna consciousness, the process of Krishna consciousness, is raised a wonderful family, two wonderful children, and so I felt like he was apt to talk on this topic. And now following him, kind of there's no way that I don't have neither the physical maturity nor not even to talk about the Krishna consciousness maturity. So kind of to follow him is quite a difficult task. I would recommend devotees to also hear, in case if you were not able to join yesterday, to hear his talk. It was quite a wonderful talk that he gave on multiple aspects, especially of why is the topic of family life is discussed within the pages of Bhagavatam? Why do we consider it mundane? So it was kind of a wonderful discussion. For me personally, when this service came that I'll have to kind of discuss on this specific verse, my mind was going all across the places. There are a lot of tangents and kind of points that we could discuss from this verse, but I wanted to kind of see it from a different perspective. As in, Srimad Bhagavatam has multiple stories, as we all know. There are stories, and then there are, like, it's a kind of combination of stories and combination of prayers. For example, we have narrations of the Lord during his activities, during his various incarnations, like Matsya, Kurma, and Prithu Maharaj, multiple, so on and so forth. And then in the second canto and in subsequent cantos also, we had in this third canto is the narrations of the creation that happens. And then there are narrations of devotees' activities, like what we are discussing, the activities what Kardama Muni and Mother Devhuti were performing, or in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, his activities, and so many. And in some, there are also indirect narrations, like the story of King Puranjana, where Narad Muni is narrating the story to King Prachina Bhari. So there are, in a way, there are multiple things. And through these, and there are obviously more than what we kind of discussed, through these and many more other means, What Srimad Bhagavatam kind of teaches us is to constantly kind of, through every page and every verse, Srimad Bhagavatam kind of is constantly inviting us to kind of look deep to what we feel we understand, and how we see ourselves and around the world, our relationships within the family that we have, the extended family, outside of just in general relationships that we have, and also our own connection with the Lord in connection with these personalities that we have, devotees, or just the family relationship that we have, and to kind of constantly inviting us to look deep. And also through that activity of kind of looking deep, questioning our own understanding and our own realizations. It's a kind of constant, um, how do we put it? Constant reminder to kind of to go further than what we currently are. So the challenge with that is, as a conditioned living entity, any story that we hear from either from the Srimad Bhagavatam or from any other Shastra, what happens is there is this high tendency of perceiving it through our own conditions. And when we say, as a conditioned living entity, we have our own conditionings. Either it could be because of the body that I'm in, or because of the family where I kind of grew up. The conditions might act in a slightly different way, even though, let's say, two boys, like I have twin boys, both of them are born at the same time, are being raised by the same mother and father in the same household, and all of that. But we see, for a specific activity or for a specific story, their reaction, or for a specific incident that's happening in their life, their reactions are very different, or how they perceive it is very different. So similarly, for all of us as conditioned living entities, anytime we are hearing any story or any kind of instructions through Srimad Bhagavatam, or for that matter, any Shastra, we tend to perceive it through our conditions. For example, in this verse, when it is said that having served him for a long time, she grew weak and emaciated due to her religious observances. When we hear that, or when we read that sentence, one possibility is to perceive Karadama Muni as a heartless husband who is not loving his wife. Here comes the mother Devahuti, who has, according to her own willingness, has chosen this life to be with Karadama Muni, considering that he is this great personality who is full of spiritual qualities. So in spite of all the opulence and the glory that she had as the daughter of Swayambhu Manu, she chose, in consultation with obviously her father Swayambhu Manu and mother Shatarupa, she chose this life. But we might perceive it as, even though she kind of willingly chose this life, Kardamuni is not being loving to her. So that one perspective is to kind of blame Kardamuni as being somebody who is heartless husband, who is not at all loving to his wife. Even though she's going weak and emaciated, he's not taking care of her. Or the other perspective we might kind of see it is, I might perceive Mother Devati as being unreasonable with her own self. You have come here, what is the point of kind of, for a lack of better term, suffering, kind of undergoing that physical suffering where you have grown so weak and emaciated, kind of not taking care of yourself. So these are two different perspectives that I can consider depending on my specific conditions that I can have, or it could be any other thing. And one more example is the word Samanavrata, which where Prabhupada is writing in the purport. The word Samanavrata indicates that it is the duty of a wife to adopt the special circumstances in which the husband is situated. Of course, if the husband is as great as Kardamamuni, then a very good result accrues from following him. But even if the husband is not a great devotee like Kardamamuni, it is a wife's duty to adopt herself according to his mentality. That makes married life very happy. So when we hear this, if I'm kind of trying to see the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam and the words of Srila Prabhupada through my conditionings, especially in the physical state that I am in, in the position of an husband, I might perceive this as a free license to expect my wife and my family to adapt to how and what I think, and kind of expecting that my wife and my kids and my family, my anybody, because whom I perceive as being kind of dependents under my care, I might think that if I'm saying this as right, I expect them to kind of agree, because it is kind of it is kind of my mentality that this is right. So all of you should follow that. For those of us who are kind of not on video, I'm just showing that my left side, I might say that this is being right, and kind of expecting everyone to follow that. Yeah, this is he's in that position, so whatever he say, and that's what might happen, where I kind of expect this as a free license. Or in other way, I might also perceive this as an unjust way of treating my family, kind of not giving them their due respect or anything. And one more final example that we can also see outside of this specific verse is in the case of Jaya Vijaya when they were cursed by Kumaras. We all have went through this sequence of Jaya Vijaya, Kumaras, and their further incarnations as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Like we kind of covered the part of Hiranyaksha. He is kind of not going into further detail. Jaya Vijaya eventually, Kumaras come and Jaya Vijaya eventually get cursed by the Kumaras. Once everything is done, finally we understand that everything was orchestrated because the Lord wanted it. And that was the cause of it. The cause was not that Kumaras felt offended. The cause was not Jaya Vijaya were disrespectful to Kumaras. Nothing of that. The actual underlying cause was that the Lord wanted it to happen. And it might appear baffling. Why would the Lord, who loves his devotees more than he loves himself, would orchestrate something which was utter chaotic for both Jay Vijay and Kumaras? And not only it was chaotic, it was not only was it confusing, but it was kind of distress. There was a lot of distress both Kumaras and Jay Vijay were going through, because each of them were thinking, I've offended the other devotee by the end of the whole pastime. So if you're just looking with our own intelligence and understanding and conditioning, it kind of many of the stories I remember once hearing long back in a talk, where if somebody hears the story of Pandavas without understanding their realizations or about the devotional service and about the shelter and the care that the Lord was providing them through each and every instance, or if somebody hears the prayers of Mother Kunti where she's asking for more and more trouble. This devotee was joking in the class, saying that somebody hears this, they might never come to the platform of devotional service, thinking that, oh, if I perform devotional service, is this what I'm going to get? Then there's no way that I want this kind of devotional service where I have to ask for more and more trouble just to kind of be under the shelter of him. So that these are the challenges that we kind of will have when we are kind of bringing our own conditionings into the pages of the Shastras, into the lives of the devotees, depending on kind of what's happening. So not just with this verse, it can, as we were saying, we just took the example of this verse of Mother Devoti and Kardamoni across the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, where it happened with Jaya Vijaya. We might also question about why did Narsimhadev take so long about Prahlad Maharaj, and why did Krishna invite gopis all across and then just said, oh, no, I'm not going to be part of this. You can go back. So on and so forth. Multiple places. We see that when we are kind of hearing the stories or the instructions from the Srimad Bhagavatam or across any Shastra with our own conditioning, what it's not what might, what will definitely happen is we'll either accept or reject the story based on how we are seeing it. Or to put it differently, we will accept or reject the story for what we cannot see due to our own conditionings. And so I'll just slightly also talk about the very famous story of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. When Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, like at that point during the 1920s and 30s, he was quite a famous spiritual leader, especially within the regions of Bengal. And that was also the place where there was a lot of this freedom struggle was kind of was quite intense. Bengal was for a long time was heart of the freedom struggle. There are a lot of freedom fighters that kind of came through that place. And one of the freedom fighter, I not able to exactly remember the name. One of the freedom fighter kind of once comes to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's ashram, and then he says, "I have a lot of questions that I want to discuss with you. Can you please give me some time?" So Saraswati Thakur, Srila Saraswati Thakur says that, yes, we will definitely discuss about these questions and any confusions or concerns that you might have. But there is an urgent service that's happening in the kitchen, where some of my, I think they had a recent huge festival, and there's a lot of service of pot washing that was kind of happening. So Srila Saraswati Thakur says that, can you please go and help them? And once you have done helping them, then you can come back and we can, however long it might take, we'll definitely sit and discuss that. And this person, who was quite a famous person, he was a huge, big freedom fighter. In spite of having that big position, he was humble enough to accept what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was asking him to do. So he goes into the kitchen, does the service, and then when he comes back, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that, okay, now I am ready to answer any kind of questions, whatever discussions that you want to have. And this person says, actually, all of my questions are answered. And Srila Saraswati Thakur says, well then, I'm glad that all of your questions are answered. If there is anything else that I can do, I'm happy to do. So it's not that this person's questions were answered during the discussion that happened in the kitchen during the pot washing. The understanding that is given by the devotees is that just by the process of performing the service, in a humble mood where he was able to accept the instructions that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was giving him, in spite of his position and in spite of his being in that high position of, just because of the humble attitude that he had, where he was willing to go perform this seemingly very low service, just by that act of humility and performing the service, all of his questions were answered. And so the remedy is, as for our misunderstanding that can be caused because of the conditioning, is what Krishna has given, and is also what the story kind of puts it in a very clear way. When Krishna says, Tadvidhi pranipatena, pariprashnena sevaya, upadekshanti te jnanam, jnaninas tattvadarshina. So when he's saying, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because he has seen the truth. So in this case, this person approached a spiritual master, who was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and inquired from him submissively. And when he was given the service, he rendered service unto him. And through this act of rendering of the service, whatever questions, whatever knowledge that he needed to get was kind of imparted onto him. So I just want to kind of expand for the next 5 minutes that we have, slightly expanding on this aspect of rendering service. So is it so kind of expanding this idea of rendering service, not just on a physical level, but on rendering service to Srimad Bhagavatam. So in here, yes, he was obviously the freedom fighter who came was performing the service, because in essence everything was kind of, to a degree, was connected to what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was trying to do in the preaching mission. The kitchen was connected to him, so everything was connected to him. So the service was also performed unto him. But in the cases what we are discussing is of when we are kind of interacting with Srimad Bhagavatam through our regular reading, or it could be through the oral reception that we are having. How do we bring about the same mentality of service to Srimad Bhagavatam, and how will that performing of that service, kind of seeing that, I just wanted to see that in 4 different aspects, and then kind of finally see how is that the remedy that we are saying of the performing of the service is kind of going to help us. So when we are trying to approach Srimad Bhagavatam, or for that matter, any story, either through the oral reception or our own specific reading, in the mood of service, We can see that in 4 different aspects. One of the aspect is kind of accepting the reality of the story. For example, in many cases, what might happen is, as we were just discussing, we either accept the story or for reject the story based on how I'm seeing it. For example, if I feel, oh, this is such a wonderful story, I might feel, yes, this is something that needs to be kind of in my heart, in my brain. But if I'm hearing or reading some story where I feel, oh, it doesn't make sense with this personality is, I don't think why is there in Srimad Bhagavatam, or why are we even discussing about him or her, then we kind of reject the story. But the first step, as in when we are rendering service to Srimad Bhagavatam, is accepting the reality of the story, which means we are hearing the story as it is, as Srila Prabhupada famously wrote, put as it is at the end of Bhagavad Gita. We are hearing Bhagavad Gita as it is. We are not trying to influence Bhagavad Gita based on our own conditionings. Similarly, the stories of Srimad Bhagavatam, or the instructions of the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the prayers of Srimad Bhagavatam, accepting the reality of the story, accepting for what it is, not based on how we are conditioning. And this can be categorized as the aspect of, or the process of Shravanam, where we are approaching a spiritual master um, are in front of the spiritual master, giving that oral reception as Shravanam. So the first aspect is accepting the reality of the story, and then comes accepting the reality of where we are, and then understanding the specific lesson the story is giving out to our own individual situation. So once we have accepted the story, then comes the point of, okay, the story is somewhere here. Prahlad Maharaj, what Kunti Maharani is praying is up there of asking for such elevated benedictions of having more and more troubles. Or in the case of Mother Devoti, where she's in that unconditional and unalloyed love for her own husband, where she's willing to go through what we might perceive it as a physical pain, accepting the reality of where we are. I'm not in a situation where I can understand the relationship between Mother Devoti and Kardama Muni, or I cannot understand the relationship between what Mother Kunti has with the Supreme Lord, or I cannot understand the relationship with what gopis have with Krishna, or I cannot even understand why Prithu Maharaj or why Dhruv Maharaj, in spite of going through all of that, was angry on was it Yakshas once his brother was killed. So I'm not in that situation where this doesn't make sense to me. So accepting the reality of where we are, and once we have accepted the reality of the story of the situation where it needs to be there, and accepting the reality of where we are, then comes the point of understanding the specific lesson the story is giving out to my own individual situation. Many times it might so happen where, as we were saying, when we hear something, being in the position of the husband, I might kind of perceive it as a free license to think that, oh, my wife should understand this lesson from this story. My son should understand this lesson from my story. My father should understand this lesson from this story. My brother should understand from this lesson from this story. But what is most important than expecting other people to kind of understand the lessons is to understand the specific lesson. There are obviously generic lessons, but every story is a direct narration that's happening between us and the Srimad Bhagavatam, and to our specific individual situation. There is a lesson that Srimad Bhagavatam is definitely trying to give us. So the second aspect is accepting the reality of where we are. And the third aspect is understanding the specific lesson the story is giving out to our own individual situation. And these two can be categorized within the aspect of mananam, where we are delving deeper into our own consciousness, our own realization, as we have first discussed, where Srimad Bhagavatam is regularly inviting us to kind of go deep. Okay, you know this, take a step forward. Okay, you know this, take a step forward further. So this is part of the Mananam. So the first one, accepting the reality of the story, is Shravanam. And then comes the Mananam, where we are kind of constantly meditating on what we have heard. And then through the process of constant meditation, we are observing and accepting the reality of where we are. And once it is done, then through the constant meditation, then there is also the specific lesson that the story is giving out to our own individual situation. And then finally, it comes, what is the way forward for us to appreciate the story and then appreciate the devotees that are there within the story, and not just there, but how do I apply the lesson that we are learning from the story? So it's a kind of combination of what happened within the process of Shravanam and Mananam is, okay, I agree that Kunti Maharani is great. I agree I'm not there, but I don't feel the genuine appreciation to what Kunti Maharani is praying. So what is the practical way forward for me? Do I talk to devotees who have further more appreciation for what Kunti Maharani is praying, or do I just go in front of Shri Radha Shyam Sundar and pray for their blessing to kind of understand what is happening in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, or whatever it needs to be there. So what is the way forward for us to kind of appreciate the story, and not just the story, but the specific devotees that are there within the story? And once we kind of are also in that place, from that position of appreciation for the devotees and for the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, for the verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, then how do we apply the lesson that we are learning? And this process can be categorized as the Nididhyasanam, which is where the practical implementations of what we are hearing, the lessons and all of that. So it is said that the Vedic understanding is usually standing on the tripod of Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam. So it's within this. So when we are performing this triangle of Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam through the mood of service attitude is what we kind of come to the point of not just accepting the story, and not just accepting of where we are and the lessons, but we'll also able to kind of move forward in our own appreciation for the stories, for the devotees, and through that appreciation kind of learning deeper values and deeper lessons, where it will not be a question of, oh, maybe it's an exaggeration, or maybe this verse of Srimad Bhagavatam or this story is not relevant to the present times what we have. So we'll not bring our own conditionings into that context. And through this process of Shravanam, Mananam, and Nididhyasanam, what Srimad Bhagavatam gradually does is it gradually, through, we might be conscious or we might not be conscious, but when we are applying the service attitude into the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam gradually will erase our own conditionings. And as Srila Prabhupada, in one of the purport, he writes, in such a position, a yogi has no other thought than to serve the Lord. And Srimad Bhagavatam is inviting us to that position of being a yogi, where there is no other thought other than to serve the Lord. Like in the case of Mother Devavati, for her, there was no other thought than to perform service to to Kardama Muni. And for Kardama Muni also, there was no other thought than to kind of reciprocate with the love of what Mother Devavati was kind of showing onto him. So in such a state, we'll kind of watch Srimad Bhagavatam through these stories, through various narrations, through all the ways that it is trying to kind of bring us through multiple stories, the Lord's incarnations, the prayers, the creation, devotees' activities, indirect narrations, whatever means that is available. Srimad Bhagavatam is kind of utilizing every other way to kind of bring us to that point where there's a gradual erasing of our own conditionings that happens, and we'll finally be able to kind of be in that situation where there is no other thought other than to kind of serve the Lord. And hopefully one day we'll all be there in that situation where it's as Mahaprabhu has written, Anandam Buddhivardhanam. So it's kind of full of joy, and kind of that's the hope we have through these regular discussions of Srimad Bhagavatam, and through the regular discussions that we have within the devotees and our own self-reading. So hopefully one day I'll be able to kind of be in that situation of being a yogi, where there is no other thought other than to serve the Lord, not we're not approaching Srimad Bhagavatam not for the philosophical understanding, not for any other thing, but just to kind of serve the Lord. So with that, I'll end. If there are any questions or discussions. we can have it.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you so much. I think you did a nice justice to these verses. So, because generally, I think the way you started, I think just by looking from our own perspective, what is happening in that situation. I was kind of, I didn't get that kind of view because at least, fortunately, when we hear,
Mm,
from the devotees, at least our perspective changes, right?
correct.
Because otherwise it would be, you mentioned about Kunti also, right? Praying for the difficulties. In this case, Mother Devahuti, she was princess. She came and serving in the forest to a person who doesn't have a kind of proper house, right? Her body was emaciated, and yeah, it looks like it is. If somebody does in our modern days, right? I don't. Without knowing their internal mood. I'm not saying that they are like Devahuti, but I'm just saying directly, generally try to comment, try to think
Correct.
about it. If we are not saying externally, at least, right? We
Yes.
think about what is the need for them to do this, but
Correct.
without knowing little bit more details about them. Unless, unfortunately, in the scriptures we know, because we are hearing from the authorities what is the reason that she is doing. Otherwise, at least we know the next thing what is happening. But in the current situation, we will not know what is going to come to that person or to the situation, right? Because we don't know the future. In the case of Bhagavad, at least we know what is happening and we are hearing from authorities. So, right? So, by her service, of course, she is getting the highest destination, right? So, she got Kapila Muni as her son, and then, of course, she get a chance to hear from him, and then she also feels at the end that she didn't serve her husband properly. All those things will be there. But in the modern world, if something happens in our day-to-day life or in devotees, so we don't want to misunderstand.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that
Very
definitely
difficult to.
that entire
Yeah.
thing is also there where we have to be also protective of individuals who are kind of impacted by the misunderstanding. Like, for example, if I'm kind of misunderstanding, if because of that my family is kind of going through some trouble,
Mm.
then it kind of also falls onto the community to kind of protect them and kind of kind of put me straight. So that aspect is always there.
Yeah.
But on an individual level, how do we kind of see these lessons is what I was trying to say.
Thank you so much.
Mhm. Thank you, bro. If there are no questions, then I think we can end. Yep. वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमः। श्रीमद्भागवतम की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय।